Hello, everybody, and welcome to SBI's Reigniting Small Business. I'm Patrick Lee with the Spark Business Institute, SBI.
And I'm Laura Richards, and today we're joined by Ashley Berghoff, founder and CEO of A Squared. We want to welcome Ashley. Today we're going to be talking about the most how to figure out and determine what is the most vital need in your business and how we can design and implement a plan to address it, and why that's especially important in times like the ones we're going through right now. Ashley, how are you?
Doing wonderful. It's such a joy to be here with both of you.
Go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to say ditto. I feel the same way. It's good to see you.
We were just discussing how backgrounds are part of everybody's worry right now as we do all these Zooms and podcasts and everything else. And so Laura's been moving her background around. I only have two backgrounds. And before we even got on here, Ashley had already moved once to accommodate the background. But let's forget about those backgrounds and just a little bit of background from you, Ashley, as to how you came to found A Squared and what it's all about.
Yeah. So my background's in the corporate world. I had kind of experience in operations and project management, kind of within consulting firms and nonprofits and things like that. And really started A Squared because I wanted the challenge of building something for myself, and I wanted the autonomy and flexibility for accommodating our family. And so I wanted the ability to build something that I could do flexibly and from home, and kind of have the ability to shift as our family shifted and things like that. So I started out really with the goal of bringing order to chaos in small businesses, just helping organize their operations, help them kind of pull stuff out of their head and make it happen. And over time, we've come to specialize really in the strategic part of that process, thinking through, all right, what are your goals? How are we going to make them happen? How can we help you focus? How can we help you get things done? I've realized that for a lot of small businesses, the information out there is all about the strategy piece, and here's all the things you need to do. And then the business owner is kind of left on their own to figure out how to make that happen and actually do it consistently in their businesses. And so that's where I am hoping to be helpful. And apologies for the baby in the background. Speaking of having a flexible work arrangement, that means having a baby downstairs. So
no worries there. So Ashley, what are you seeing with your clients? How are people behaving differently during these times? And is there a positive happening with folks sort of stepping back and taking a look here, or is it more of the same?
It depends on kind of how people are approaching it. So some of my clients were actually really hopeful for the industry, because I work with a lot of online service providers, copywriters, brand strategists, coaches, people like that. And so they felt like as everyone came home and started working from home, there was more openness to that as a viable option for businesses to hire virtual support, for people to recognize that you can be really productive and do great work from home. So I saw some of that, which was interesting, and some of them were busier than ever before because of it. Others kind of went into freeze mode for a couple of months and are just now starting to say, okay, I think we have our feet under us again. Let's see where we can go. And yeah, a lot of the challenges have been around just, what do I do next, right? If I could just figure out what one thing I need to do next, that would be great. And so
that was actually one of the reasons why I suggested you and thought you'd be great to work with. You've worked with us before at SBI and helping us streamline a process. And one of the things, words of advice Patrick gave on our last Reigniting Small Business podcast was to small business owners: don't stop. Now is the time to think and to make changes. Don't freeze.
Right.
Use this as an opportunity. And so with that, I know in some of the work that you're doing, particularly now, in terms of let's identify one major impediment and figure out a process to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like for you, and how is that helping your clients right now?
Yeah. So late last year, I learned about a new methodology created by Mike Michalowicz, if you've heard of him. He's an entrepreneur, business author, called Fix This Next. And the whole concept of the framework was, here's something you can use in 15 minutes to identify one thing you can focus on to make your business stronger. And it was based on this kind of hierarchy of needs, very similar to how Maslow created a hierarchy of needs for humans. He created the business version of that, right? To say, we all have, even though each business is unique and has unique challenges, we all have these core needs. And if we understand where we need to focus, the one area of focus that we need to have in our business, we'll move the needle a lot faster. Because I've seen in myself and in a lot of my clients this, as an entrepreneur, you're wearing all the hats, right? Not just many hats, all the hats. And you're trying to solve a million problems at the same time and put out the fires that are in front of you, right? And so the point is to step back. And I think in some ways this whole wild pandemic has been an opportunity to do that. Step back, look at everything objectively and say, I'm going to channel all of my energy into this one thing. And that's provided really good clarity for the people that I've been working through it with, to say, here's something foundational that we actually need to look at first before you start doing these other, maybe more shiny things, but that will help your business move forward a lot faster than if you try to do all the things at one time.
So one of the things I found with a lot of my clients is that their initial, if you ask them to diagnose or figure out what they should do next, it's almost always wrong.
Yes. Yes.
What is it that you do, or what process do you put them through to help them not only determine what might be the right thing, but help them realize that is the right thing, because that desire in them that's so strong that they know that answer, even though they keep running into the same wall over and over again, they stand up and they do it again. So how do you get clarity there?
Yeah, so one thing I like about the business hierarchy of needs is it can provide that objective, data-driven view for them, to say, you think you have a sales problem, but you actually have a profit problem, or you think you have an order problem, but you actually have a sales problem, right? And so what we do is we just ask them a series of questions based on each of those things, to say, all right, based on how you've answered these yes or no questions, this is your one core need. And it's separate from their gut, it's separate from their instinct. And a lot of the training around the business hierarchy of needs is to say, as humans, we have instincts about a lot of our core vital needs, right? We know if we're thirsty versus if we need more air. But even then, we can get it wrong, right? Like, we think we have a money problem when really we have a deeper challenge or something like that, right? And so with our business, we have no instinct whatsoever. And so our gut is very likely to steer us wrong on that. And so the framework can kind of say, hey, answer these questions. You'll have a clear answer. Trust it, trust the framework, and then focus on that one area before you start working on the thing that you think is your core vital need.
So the thing that strikes me when you say that, though, is I've had many rational conversations with business owners where we do make a determination as to, okay, that makes sense. Let's go in that direction. The ability to stay on that path, though, it seems really difficult. Those conflicting gut instincts, along with whatever's loud and squeaky at the moment, or whatever's shiny, to move people off of that. How do you put in place a process where, after realization and acknowledgement of that you can help keep them on a road? Because we all know that no new habits are formed in 3 days. No real significant impacts are had with a week of effort. It takes a whole heck of a lot longer to get there.
Yeah, and that's, I think, where Fix This Next stops and the real work begins, because it's the focus part's the most challenging. And when I first started my business, if people came to me and said, hey, we want to do X, then we're like, all right, let's go down that road. And then 3 weeks later, if they're like, just kidding, we're going to do this instead, we kind of go down that road. And so one of the things I've been really trying to find is the best way to, still say, hey, you're in the driver's seat of your business. You get to make these calls, but here's some tools and frameworks I can do to help curb those instincts, because most of the entrepreneurs I work with are aware that it's a problem, but it stays as a problem, right? So one thing we've been experimenting with that has been somewhat helpful has been, rather than an annual planning cycle, a 6-week one. Because most of my entrepreneurs aren't willing to commit to a single path for a year. Too much changes, and some things should change over the course of a year. But 6 weeks is easier to say, for the next 6 weeks, you're doing direct outreach. You've committed to that. And then when you want to do something else 3 weeks from now, we're going to come back to that and say, is there a reason why we're wanting to change course from the thing that we committed to spending 6 weeks on, right? And that has been helpful, not perfect, but kind of helpful to say, hey, are you hitting an obstacle with this? Is this scary? Or is there a real reason? Is there a good reason to change course? Most of the time there usually isn't. It's more that it's scary, or they don't like it, or they found something else, or they watched a training where someone told them to do something else. And we can then have that commitment to come back to say, hey, we can evaluate that as your next 6 weeks, but for now, let's focus. And that's been a good way for me and my own business too, to say, here's the list. These are the 6 projects I have for the next 6 weeks. I'm going to commit to those, and anything else that I have some grand idea to do must be placed on the back burner until the 6 weeks is done. And that gives, I think, enough flexibility for the entrepreneurs I'm working with, because most of them wouldn't be willing to say, oh yeah, next year I'll do that. They wouldn't be able to make that kind of commitment, but 6 weeks is doable.
And so, Ashley, how much do you deviate from what you would be doing normally when you're in a crisis situation, short-term crunch, or, people just need change now? They have to approach it differently because of the times.
Yeah. I think then your core vital need shifts, and sometimes it can shift overnight, right? So one of the things about the business hierarchy of needs, similar to Maslow's, is you could be working on something else. Say so the business hierarchy of needs has sales at the bottom, profit, order, impact, and legacy, right? So a business could be all the way at the top, maybe thinking about leadership transition or what it might look like to sell their business, but something like this hits, and all of a sudden your core need reverts back to sales, right? You need to keep your business strong. So then it might shift to, all right, what does our messaging need to look like today? It's going to maybe be different. Maybe we need to change how we're delivering what we deliver. And that becomes a core vital need. And it's okay to make those kinds of shifts for things like this, right? Just like if we're having a deep philosophical conversation and start choking, core vital need shifts immediately, right? So I think for a lot of my people, like kind of Patrick was saying earlier, it was to say, all right, we're going to shift, but we're not going to stop, right? We might shift to how you can just tweak what you're doing already to make it fit more closely with the new needs of your target market, to be there for them with what they need right now, but we're not going to just shut down. And having that ability to shift when you need to is one of the perks of being an entrepreneur in a way. Big businesses can't do it quite as quickly. But it's that balance of being dynamic without just constantly shifting and never making progress, right?
True. I have to ask you this question because you always talk to, the contractor that never does his own bathroom, the cobbler that has no shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So how often are you applying these methodologies in your own business? And what have you changed, if anything, over the past 90 days?
So Fix This Next has been really helpful for me because I knew from that prospect attraction was my core vital need. And that was the case before coronavirus hit. And so it kind of gave me permission to focus almost all of my energy on that one thing. So I'm spending hours a day figuring out how we want to do marketing and how we want to be in the marketplace and things like that. So that's been really helpful. In terms of shifting, because I was already doing what a lot of people are doing, right? Juggling childcare with working from home. That was my normal. I haven't had as much of a change in terms of the way my business needed to operate. And a lot of my ongoing clients haven't seen as major of impacts either. So the bigger challenge for me has been, how do I take action quickly? Because I'm a process engineer, I can over-engineer my stuff to death. And so the thing I've been having to learn, especially with things like this, where messaging that worked last month is not messaging that's going to work this month, and that's not going to work next month, to be willing to take action, let it be imperfect, be willing to change, has been my biggest learning from this.
I think it's tremendous. And I think everybody, all the business owners out there listening to that can identify, or at least I know I can.
Thanks.
So we've spent quite a few conversations talking about sort of the radical innovations that this whole pandemic has forced a whole lot of different businesses to go into.
Mm-hmm.
And some businesses absolutely have had to sort of reinvent themselves on the fly, or they were not going to be viable.
Right.
But what this struck me as, though, for most businesses, was not so much that they needed to get that radical, but that this gave that step back where all of a sudden the veil is lifted and actually look and acknowledge what you have going on.
Right.
And to that, your process seems more appropriate for somebody who's sort of just woken up and goes, okay, wait a minute, I'm starting to understand my hierarchy of needs here.
Yes.
And I've been working over here, and I need to admit that ignoring over here is the issue.
Right.
Right. So to me, it sounds like focus is kind of the main piece of this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that a business owner can go through this on their own, or is it absolutely either read the book or talk to you or find an advisor, or how do you feel that fits into the whole picture?
That's a great question. I think if a business owner is already pretty good at taking action and having that objective view and committing to a path, the book might be sufficient. And I have a free assessment people can take where they can ask those 30 questions for themselves, get the answer themselves, and move forward. Most people would get that answer and say, okay, great, now what? Right? You're telling me my margins aren't good enough, but I don't know what that means or what to do with it or how to change, right? And to your point too, they might not be willing to accept that that's the answer if they had a different answer in their head. And so I think that's where having a third perspective, an objective view, can be really, really helpful to step in and say, this is where I see your business is really, really healthy. This is where I think you need to be focusing your energy. This is why you got the answer you did. Let's dive into exactly how we can strengthen your business in this area. And so having some support for that, and then the ability to have someone holding you accountable to it, I think is really helpful. It's almost like having a bit of a short-term boss, which a lot of us feel like I think we need at some times, right? Having that person coming in and saying, hey, last week you committed to this, but you're not doing that anymore. What's up? And having that accountability can be really helpful when otherwise you can change track and nobody has any idea that you did it. So there's no real consequences, but you're also not making real progress, right? So I think it's really helpful to have someone with you. But if you just need the tool and are ready to take action on whatever the result is, then the book's perfect for that.
How do you benchmark?
With kind of progress?
Yeah, like with if you follow the book and the process as designed, how does it benchmark, or are you setting your benchmarks in conjunction with that business owner and figuring it out from there?
Yeah, the book doesn't have a whole lot of that in there. And so that's where having external support can be really helpful. So it'll be able to tell you, for example, your business model right now is not congruent with the amount of money you need to make for the lifestyle that you wanted your business to support, right? It can tell you that, but it can't tell you, here's how you measure your results. Here's how long you can expect this to take. Here's the best way to adjust your business model to get where you want to go. It'll just tell you that's your one core vital need, right? And so that's where things get much more personalized, right? To say, hey, do we maybe need to adjust your expectations for your business at this stage, right? Like if you started your business 6 months ago and you're making $50,000 and you want to take home $50,000, probably not the right expectation, right? Like you're going to have expenses. Your business can't support that salary right now. So maybe let's adjust the expectations and work towards that in the future. But someone else might have very reasonable expectations and just needs to tweak their margins a little bit or bring more clients in. There's nothing wrong with their business model. They just need more people, whatever it might be. Then you kind of start seeing much more unique and customized benchmarks, metrics, solutions, all of those pieces.
So when we're dealing with clients using our great small business plateau model, one of the things we tell them is that once they've committed to, we call it jumping off the ledge, like once they've committed to these changes and shifting their systems and all, that it's not just a lateral move to new stuff. It feels like a drop because everything you understand and know has sort of disappeared from there. Things tend to always get a little bit worse with radical change or change in general before they get better. And that level of panic that the business owner feels is that first challenge to getting through this. So they've taken their assessment, they've got their radical paradigm shift, and they buy into it. But then when they start feeling it, I think things tend to change.
Right.
What advice or how do you handle that when they've done all the work and you've all, but now they're looking at you going, no, we're doing this. So,
Yeah. One of the things I've started talking more about as I experienced it myself is a lot of my clients are freelancers and they want more of an entrepreneurial business. They want something that's bigger than themselves. Not all freelancers do, but a lot of my clients do. And one thing that I didn't realize going in, and they often don't realize, is that you're in a lot of ways starting a new business, that your freelancing work is funding the beginnings of your entrepreneurial business. And you're completely changing how you operate, how you show up in the world. And the dip is real in that transition, right? And even thinking about the last 2 years of data for my business, like the line was kind of up and then it would dip and then come back up and then dip and come back up, right? Exactly how you're saying. Every time I had to make a big shift, income went down for 2 months before coming back up. Yeah. And so I think knowing that that's normal and that it doesn't mean that anything's wrong, I think is helpful to understand. Like, oh, I am transitioning from freelancer to something else, and that's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be messy. And it's going to mean basically killing my freelancer business and building a different one over time, right? Because you're not selling your time for money anymore. And that's a completely different business model. And so a lot of what I've been saying is buckle up, prepare for this, know it's coming. Nothing's wrong with you. You're not doing anything wrong, but this is what it's going to look like for a while you transform not just your business, but how you do what you do. Like all of that's going to look different.
So do you ever find that even though you've given them the expectations and they know it's coming, when it happens, they still, unbuckle their seatbelt and get ready to flee, and you're like holding on to their arm going, don't go, you've done the worst part, you've already experienced it.
Yeah. And that was me last year, when I was right about to have a child. So if I was going to stay as a freelancer, my business was going to go to zero overnight, right? Like that was it. Because I was needing to step away from the business and I would have to come back and start from scratch. And so I had to start hiring people, but it took a while in sales calls for me to stop being like, I'll do this and I'll do that, right? Like it's habit. And so it takes a few times of being like, oh, right, I wasn't supposed to say that, was I? And then following through on the commitments and recommitting to doing it differently the next time, and kind of giving it time. But I think, that's where I'm still finding the balance with my clients of kind of supporting them, saying, hey, if this is what you need to do for a while, that's okay. But also being willing to tell the truth of like, hang tight, try to, stay the track, and it'll get better.
So this is wisdom for any time. It doesn't have to be this pandemic and all. But I kind of want to bring it back around to, the country's starting to attempt to reopen. There's a whole lot of angst around how this works and what happens and all. So into that specific situation, what sort of advice would you give? And do you have a good story from one of your clients that sort of shows rising to the occasion for this kind of situation?
Well, that's a great one. So it depends on your industry, right? But for a lot of my clients, this is kind of the opportunity to kind of ride the wave back up, right? To have everything in place and to start operating differently. Because as the economy recovers, it can be a huge opportunity for small businesses like ours to ride that wave, right? And to learn a lot in the meantime. So what I've been doing a lot in my own business and have been talking with my clients about is just kind of using this time as permission to experiment and try different things and just see what happens. And then do things badly for a while as you get better at them. Because if you don't have an audience right now, you can try stuff, right? Get stuff out there, see what works. The consequences aren't huge because only 5 people are watching your video, right? But
you're not talking about this podcast, right?
No. But you can try all that stuff and get better and better and better at it. And then as things recover, you're positioned to ride the wave back up. And for a story, one of our clients really started the year incredibly strong. And also his wife had a child in, I think, March. And so his life was changing, his business was changing, but he was starting in a really strong place. And it's been cool to watch how even with everything being uncertain, he's just continuing forward with his plan, like what you were saying before, kind of just following through on what he said he was going to do, really starting the hard process of wanting to build an agency. He's a copywriter and is building out kind of a media agency, hiring people, investing in them, talking to new clients, showing up with a lot of energy and optimism. And I think his clients are loving that because I think all of us are a little bit tired of bad news, a little bit tired of pandemic conversation, and it's real and it's still impacting us, but we also are excited to see good news, right? And people doing well and people excited about what they're doing and believing that what they're doing is going to work and what he's doing is working and he believes in it. And so it's just been really cool. And I don't think we can take credit for any of that, but it's just been fun to be part of the process with him of sitting down and saying, all right, here's what we're going to do. Knock it out, get stuff done, grow, be willing to invest in the business. And it's working for him. He's in a really good spot.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I think that might be a good place to leave it. Patrick, do you have any words of wisdom? We got about a minute left to half an hour.
Words of wisdom. Call A Squared. There's the wisdom for you. Actually, I will give a little tiny plug because I've worked with other folks who look at workflow and all that, and your ability to put clarity on things was always really impressive to me.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so I urge anybody listening to this to take Ashley's words of wisdom to heart because I have found her clarity always to be enlightening and good. So there you go.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I appreciate that.
Ashley, thanks for joining us today. And we appreciate everything that you have to teach our business community.
Thank you so much, Laura. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you both. I've really loved being kind of part of having a relationship with Spark for a while. So it's great.
Awesome.
All right.
And thanks everybody for listening today, and we'll be back on Thursday.